Alright, Shalom, Shalom. This is Brother Mayum coming at you from GMS Tampa Bay. First and foremost, I want to give all the praise and all the glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachahak Wadash. Double honors to the elders apostles of Great Millstone, and much blessing and salutations unto the Akim who are diligently pushing out this truth and sincerity. And just want to do a quick video. Hopefully I can make it quick, get right to the point. But you know, just want to get into this little bit of economic news. You know, specifically going into a little bit about what's going on, you know, out there with the Japanese market. You know, and as brothers have been going into, you know, and keeping up, you know, up on the news about with XRP. You know, for brothers that don't know what XRP is, and for you sisters as well, you know, watch the head, you know, the head brother out here, brother Ash, on his channel. He has a series. If you look for his in his video list, he has a little section that he's made that has, you know, the series of videos that he's done on this XRP system, and that how, you know, that all ties to the MOTB. All right, because the XRP is going to be that so-called bridge to be able to, you know, move this digital currency that's going to be used. Okay, and with what's happening right now with Japan's currency, all right, this is something that we need to, that you should at least, you know, be up on game with, because it could potentially, you know, thrust forward this MOTB system being implemented. All right, so I want to speak a little bit about this, and Lord's will, this will be edifying. I want to first start off with this article, and this is kind of what stirred the spirit up. Obviously, brothers have been talking about this, so, you know, this has been on the back of my mind. But as I came across this video, or this article, and it actually came out on August 3rd, so about a week ago, a little over a week, about a week and a half or so, this article came out. But it's entitled, "The U.S. Intervenes as Japan Dumps Treasuries to Rescue Plummeting Yen." It says Tokyo and Washington have threatened further coordinated moves to contain turmoil spreading from currency markets into the bond markets. Okay, and, you know, again, you know, for brothers that haven't, you know, been keeping up with, you know, some of this, you know, news concerning Japan, understand that Japan and America have had an alliance for many years. You know, really, you know, it's that alliance came from World War II. You know, Esau fucked Moab or Ammon up so bad, you know, that these damn Ammonites, you know, gave in to Esau. Okay, and who can blame him? This damn devil just dropped 2 nukes on their ass. You know, what else? What else can you do? All right, but as we're gonna get into a little bit of how this relationship between the United States and Japan kind of works as far as this bond market and the currency markets, and it's important that you understand that these two markets um, are an important piece as to why the Japanese currency is valued so low, and why the United States, um, you know, it it holds its power over that Japanese yen, and how, you know, the U.S. dollar benefits from that. Okay, and real quick, let's just get into what are currency markets and what are bond markets, so we understand the difference. What are the all right? Just bear with me, Salakia. All right. So this is just a quick, you know, overview of it. It is off of Google AI, so, you know, may not be the most reliable source of information, but in this day and age, you just gotta, you know, trust in the spirit. All right. But I typed in once again, what are the differences between currency markets and bond markets? All right. So just so we can get an understanding of the two, because obviously, they're all a part. It's a part of the economy, but it's two different arteries, so to say, of you know things that prop up economies. Okay, so a currency market, it says has here in parentheses forex, Slovakia, trade national money pairs to set exchange rates, operating 24 hours a day with massive global liquidity and no central exchange. Bond markets trade debt securities, and that's important to know. Debt securities. I'll read that again. Bond markets trade debt securities issued by governments and companies to raise capital, paying regular interest over fixed terms with set maturity dates. All right, so to understand, or to recap, bond markets are basically U.S. debt. Okay, that let's read it again. Bond markets trade debt securities in Slovakia issued by governments and companies to raise capital, buying regular or paying regular interest over fixed terms with set maturity dates. So it's basically like a contract that they'll pay you this amount of interest if you loan them your money, because you're getting that those um, debt securities from the government. Okay, and they're taking your money, and the money that they're using for these investments, they're giving you a set amount of current interest. All right. It says the core differences: what is traded currencies versus debt maturity. Yeah, so plain and straight to the point. Currencies versus debt. Currency market is you're trading monies. All right, whether it be the yen or the U.S. dollar, they each have their own value compared to each other. Okay, and obviously debt, is you become a debt holder of a company, and they use that money of yours, to invest and grow as a company, so to say. So it says maturity none for cash currencies, fixed terms 1 to 30 years for bonds. It says income currency profit comes from rate changes. All right, so that the value between the two, that margin between them is going to be that currency profit. All right, and obviously it takes less U.S. dollars to get one U.S. or 1 yen. Okay, so you increase the amount of U.S. dollars that you're wanting to trade, you get so-called more money in yen because its value is different. Okay, and this is where that comes into play with these bond markets, because of how the things are going into, because I personally see this, the bond market as way more important of a market than, say the currency, the value of a dollar or something like that. The bond market really is, to me, something that's far more important, and something to be out on the lookout for, because when the bond market starts to take a shit, that's literally almost one of the last legs that goes out before an economy completely comes crumbling down, which is what looks like they're trying to have happen. Okay, you have to understand that. Okay, so you can go a little bit more into the differences between currency market and bond market, but I want to put that in your mind, that bond markets, again, in my opinion, are more important. Okay, and after debt market or the bond market, it's damn, what's the? I think it starts with a Q. I forget exactly, but there's one more. There's another aspect of the economy that's more important than the um, than the bond market. I can't remember. It's on the tip of my tongue. If a brother watching this knows what I'm talking about, Bubba Kashar, put it in the comment board. It's at the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember exactly what it's called, and I don't want to say the wrong thing and lead brothers astray. So, but I'm gonna read a little bit of this article. Let me get back to that, and then we're gonna get just a quick dive into what's kind of going on over there in Japan and shit like that, going through the chat GPT. So the article, U.S. intervenes as Japan dumps treasuries to rescue the yuan. It says Japan and the U.S. have officially confirmed an extraordinary joint intervention to rescue the yen after its collapse towards a 4-decade low spilled over into the already strained American government debt market. Japanese Finance Minister Satsuki Katayama announced the operation on Monday morning in Tokyo, saying the two governments jointly purchased yen because U.S. trading on Friday, July 30, or during U.S. trading on Friday, July 31st. So you see, they purchased more of that Japanese debt to try to kind of help out that economy so they can have some money to work with. Okay, and it says saying the two governments jointly purchased yen during the U.S. trade. Okay, it says the intervention was intended to counter excessive volatility and disorderly movements in the currency, Katayama said, adding that Tokyo remained in close contact with the U.S. Treasury and will not hesitate to conduct further joint intervention. And see, matter of fact, let's get this quick precept. All right, and you got to understand these countries like Japan, and there's other countries out there as well. They're all a part of this Babylonian, or they're subjects onto this Babylonian nation. Okay, they themselves have made their governing of their people and their country to how the beast here in Babylon, this whore, runs her country. All right, so let me get that article back up. Right, Salakia. Alright, now I remember what I was looking for. This is Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 9. Alright, because again, these little nations that are tied to America, that have become dependent upon America, are now, you're starting to see that these nations have been crumbling, and now we're getting to the point to where there's no amount of band-aids no large size of a band-aid that can be put to hold this thing from completely falling apart. It's received too many wounds. Okay, this system, and you see it failing in these other countries, man. Okay, they're just completely falling apart. This is Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 8. Babylon. Oh, let me start up above. We'll start at verse 6. It says, "Flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense." And guess what? All these nations have all come to be complicit with one another. All right? And they become complicit in they become complicit in dang, how do I put this? Pretty much the judgment that was brought upon the Israelites. These nations were all complicit alongside Esau. Okay, and they've all profited off of the downfall of our people. Okay, so all these different alliances you see from different nations, these are, America, remember, does business with all these different nations, whether they have political turmoil or animosity amongst each other. America still does financial business with these different countries. America's still buying Chinese products. All right, America's still buying Russian resources. Okay, America still orders from these countries. You still get these products over here, man. Okay? And the reason that's being because going thousands and thousands of years ago, these nations all have made a pact with one another, all right, to subjugate the Lord's people, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. All right? But see, now, as the time had, real quick, let me get this Psalms 83. And I'll just start at the top. It says, keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. And see, the Lord has allowed these different nations that have ruled and given themselves over onto this beast, all right, have all profited and have all become, how do I put this? It's like, I'm just going off the spirit, so I'm just, trying to put emphasis on, on this. They've been calm, cool, and collected. So like, I can't really come up with another term, but they've become, safe, man. In a roundabout way, they thought that, oh well, it's been so long we haven't been judged for, being the way we are towards the Lord's people. He still allows us to do it. So, they've lost all form of fear of retaliation. And so now what we see happening is they're realizing, these nations, that there's nothing they can do to heal these things from happening. All right. I did my last video going into all these different earthquakes that have been happening, with that most recent one being that one there in Colombia. I believe it was like a 7.4, if I'm not mistaken. All right, you just had this solar eclipse go by in Japan. Or it's lucky I got Japan on my mind, but went across Western Europe. But brothers sent out the video of it out there in Spain. The Lord is showing that, hey, he ain't playing no more. Now he's having these things come to pass. Now the Lord is you're noticing more and more that these countries are crumbling, that this mountain is falling apart. Okay? So when we're asking the Lord to not hold his peace anymore, we're being dead serious, man. We wholeheartedly want to see this place fall apart. And guess what, brothers? And you few sisters out there, we're starting to see that, man. We are starting to see the downfall of this place, specifically America, but Babylon and its whole system and tangled tentacles that have wrapped itself around the entire earth. Okay? And you see, this is indirectly dealing with the yen, indirectly going to make effects, and we're going to see here in America, man. All right, but real quick, let me finish this off. It says, verse 2, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. And that's what they did. They beat Yasharallah. They beat Yahweh Bashim Yahushai out of us. Okay? They deleted through violence our very remembrance of who we were, of our heritage, fulfilling the prophecies written in the scriptures, man, that we should discontinue from our inheritance. And that happened. Okay? Because alongside our heritage goes the promises. And the promises are our inheritance. Okay? And we've forgotten about that. Okay? That this earth and everything and everyone in it was created for our sakes. That the kingdom of heaven that the scriptures talk about, that's going to be done here, as it says in the Lord's Prayer, let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we're not going to get there, as the scriptures say, unless there be violence, unless these nations pay for what they have done to the Lord's people. Unless the Lord breaks down what's being built and what has been built. See, all these things have to go, man. They can't just linger around and you know, the kingdom of heaven just be established in a corner in the earth. Hell no. You out your damn mind. This is our shit, man. And we're going to build what is rightfully ours, and we're going to build right and from the bottom up. Okay? And guess who's going to do it? These other nations, man. But for us to get there, there has to be a violent fall. There has to be a collapse. Okay? And this is what we see happening, man. This is why we do these videos, so that we may rejoice at the times wherein we are. Okay, the scriptures tell us about no greater joy has a man than to see the downfall of his enemies and the joy of children. Those are the two things that the Lord specifically mentioned when it comes to joy and happiness for a man. To see the downfall of his enemies and to have joy of his children. And the Lord is fulfilling those things for us, man. Okay? And as our enemies fall, that opportunity of being able to have joy of our children gets closer and closer. Because that ain't going to happen until the kingdom of heaven, no matter what you think or how you feel or whatever you do. True enjoyment of your child can't be found on this earth, on this current fashion of this world, man. Okay, so I'll suffice with just seeing our enemies fall for now. Okay, you see, we gotta be like King Solomon, man. King Solomon didn't require, you know, everything, man. He was just content with knowing the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to be able to guide Israel. Okay, for wisdom. And everything else was then given to him afterwards, man. See, we just, the prophets of Yahweh Shem Shai, the 144,000, and the rest of the elect, we just want to be saved, man. That's it. We don't want nothing else. We just want to be saved. And when we see things like this, where these nations that have been confederate for thousands of years, no matter what they tell you on the news, on the boob tube, these nations are all complicit with one another. They're all in one accord. And that's something that you come to find out the higher you go up on this ladder, okay, of wisdom of this earth. Okay, that's why, well, you know, that's a different topic for a different lesson. But see, these nations all got to pay. And who do you find on here? It says verse 6, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon, who are the so-called Japanese today, and the Ammonites. Okay, Edom being the so-called white people, the white race. Ishmael, or the Ishmaelites, are the people of the Arab nations. Okay, it says of Moab, the so-called Chinese, the so-called Asian race. Okay, North Korea, South Korea. Okay, those nations fall under that banner of Moab. Okay, and the Hagarenes, which if I'm not mistaken, those are Hamites, and Gebal and Ammon. And who are the Ammonites? The so-called Japanese today. Okay, or North Korea and South Korea might fall under Ammon as well. You know, I don't really, you know, I haven't really gone into that in a while. You know, not that it's really that of importance, because nonetheless, whoever they fall under, they're going into captivity as well. So, you know, they fall under the category of a heathen nation. Okay. But see, these nations, all right, to this day, are under the same league, man. So we see this, these financial woes as a sign that the Lord is bringing these down, man. And now it's getting real. Okay. So let me go into this real quick, because I don't want to keep y'all too long. Let me go into this a little bit. I initially, and this was just something quick. A matter of fact, I'm just gonna get to the point because I got to a certain section or a certain part in this conversation where I asked the chat to give me a step-by-step of what things would happen, because essentially what we see happening, and matter of fact, I'll just go to the very beginning. All right, where I asked, how does the current state of affairs with Japanese financial markets, so I kept it kind of broad, affect the world economy if, like some have stated would happen, they raised their interest rates. Now, there's a little bit more context behind this conversation. I'm just trying to get to the point. All right, but it says, yes, Japan raising interest rates further could have an impact far beyond Japan, and the reason is somewhat counterintuitive. Japan has effectively been one of the world's cheapest sources of borrowed money for decades. So understand that, just so we're clear, Japan, the yen, was a source of cheap borrowed money, because why? The interest rates were, I believe, even at a certain point, and for a long point, 0%. So what you borrowed is all you had to give back. And in Esau's world, that is unheard of. So the fact that was like that, and for the duration of how long it was, shows you that Edom was, following a certain plan of trying to achieve something. And now we're going to see here that plan is failing him. That's why in that Jeremiah 51, we briefly went into it. And the spirit of once we go back into it, but in the spirit of time, we're gonna just keep moving forward. But this was everything that's happened was all a part of Esau's plan to get to this point to where we're at today, which ultimately is Esau's one of Esau's tactics of him trying to get into his blessing, or him trying to circumvent his way into him receiving of his blessing and remaining in power of the earth. But it's ultimately going to fail him. We know that, but this will happen. What Esau has set up the economy for is going to happen. This place will collapse. And the end result of all this is going to be the MOTB. And that's why this Clarity Act and XRP, which is involved with the Clarity Act predominantly, is very important news to be paying attention to. Which, like I said, the head brother, GMS Tampa Bay, okay, it's the channel. He does a series, him and the brother Malakia, entitled MOTB, something along those lines. And the brother has, videos on there for those of you that want to watch and get up to date. Find the time, break it up as you can, and be edified. All right. But it goes, yes, Japan raising interest rates could further impact far beyond Japan, and the reason is somewhat counterintuitive. Japan has effectively been one of the world's cheapest sources of borrowed money for decades. As of August 13th, the Bank of Japan has already raised its interest rates to 1%, the highest level in decades. And again, like I said, and you can look it up to get the exact timeline or time frame. Japan at one point had 0% interest, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? And it said that they raised it up to 1% is where it's at now. Now, obviously, that's been through the process of time. All hell would have broken loose if them niggas went from 0 to 1% immediately overnight. All right? But what we're going to ready to see here very soon is something very similar to that, if not that itself. Okay? It said the yen remains extremely weak, around 159 yen per dollar. You see, so for $1 US, you get 159 yen. All right, and markets are increasingly betted that the Bank of Japan will raise rates again, potentially as soon as September. See, Esau has all forms of ways that this devil tries to make money, man. All right, but let me pull up this article real quick. It's off of FitchRatings.com. It says further yen appreciation meaning value increase, likely to require Bank of Japan rate hikes. You see? And, if I can remember, Lord's will, I'll put this in the description box. Brothers can go into it. But this is where they get that source from. The chat here. It says the important issue, going back to this conversation, the important issue isn't simply Japan raises rates. It's what happens to the enormous amount of money that has been borrowed in yen and invested elsewhere. So, and it's going to go into what it's talking about here. Okay, it's going to give you an example. All right, says the keys. The yen carry trade, and that's what this system of trading has been coined. The yen carry trade. It says for years, investors could essentially do this: borrow Japanese yen at very low interest rates. Then they would convert the yen into dollars, euros, or whatever other currency they're going to, because remember, yen was a lot more cheaper to borrow. So then you convert that, okay, into another currency, okay, and you profit off of that margin between the interest rates, okay. So it says they buy with that converted money, that converted yen, they buy higher yielding assets, okay, and they keep the difference as profit. So that is what a yen carry trade is, and that's how a lot of these investors were making money. So what investors do you think these were? Well, you best believe a lot of those were those small hats. Again, this is all a part of Esau's plan. He profits on one side of it, and on the other side, he profits even more. See, he has set up his system to no matter what side he's on, he profits. And there's the example of that is in the betting that they do in the first place. Okay, because what? They bet that interest rates will go up. And then they manipulate things. So a certain few that are in the know, in the game, they make money. You see? And so now we're at a junction in society where the collapse of the economy is the last move to do for them to make their profit. And as the old slogan goes, order out of chaos, a solution can be presented that will incorporate everyone giving up all their rights. Incorporate you losing access to every and anything unless you're a part of the digital financial new world. Okay? So back to this conversation, it says, for example, imagine an investor borrows 1 billion yen at 0.1%, converts it to dollars, and buys U.S. bonds yielding, remember those bonds, those debt, so they buy U.S. debt, okay? You see, remember, they bought 1 million yen at 0.1%, that being the interest rate. They convert that money over to yen, and with those they convert that over to the U.S. dollar, and with those dollars, they buy U.S. debt, and they make money off that debt, 4 to 5%. However the terms are structured. Okay, it says that's an attractive trade as long as the yen remains weak or stable. Key point. Weak and stable. And that has been the plan for the longest time. Why? To draw people into this thing so that when Esau pulls that rug, it affects enough big players that the world goes into panic. And we're going to see some of the steps of what happens when people start panicking, starting from these investors that have for the longest time been depending that this yen stay cheap. But now the current world affairs is fucking with that. So what do you think is going to happen? A shock. And again, the can has been kicked down the road so long that the Lord ain't prolonging the times anymore, man. Let's get that real quick. And what's that? Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 11. It says, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Though a sinner do evil 100 times, and his days be prolonged, yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear the Lord, which fear before him. You see? And so we gladly, those of us that became aware of who Yahweh Bashim Yahushai are and how we pleased them, okay, we joyfully took our chastisement on this side that the Lord has given us and continues to give us, to this day. Because that's what serving the Heavenly Father comes with acknowledgement of the things that you've committed in the past, the acknowledgement of the things that you currently make, the mistakes you make, the things the habits that you have that you fight to get rid of and to stay in order. At the end of the day, we're not perfect. We fail at some of those things because we're in this flesh, unfortunately. Okay, but the Lord is getting ready to bring an end to that. Okay, and that's what sets us apart. Okay, is that we have repented from those things and we stop doing those things. But see, those evil works coming from our people, all right, they continue to do those things and they don't even acknowledge. So what suffering do they go through? None. Although they catch all sorts of hell from the world, but that's everybody. Jake is going to receive things at a certain level real soon, but right now the Lord is letting them motherfuckers live. Why? Because they're going to receive a judgment. And see, the time that the nations have had their fun has been way longer than you Jakes, man. It's 2026, and now you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans are just starting to get high enough in your bankroll that you can say, a small portion of our people are somewhat doing okay, and by being fools at that. So that's a great achievement for Jake. But see, these heathens have had joy of bullshitting around and making money and having resource and this and that for hundreds and thousands of years. That's why I say this system wasn't created for you Jakes, man. It was set up for primarily Esau, Edom, and then the other nations. That's why they benefit from it, and you Jakes have to lose everything to gain a sliver of what this world is has been, I'll say, created to reward you with. Okay, because the Lord is coming to change how this world has been turned into and how it's used. Okay, but it says it's not executed speedily. The Lord is allowing it. Okay, but as Lamentations 4:1, that time is it. That time is up for Esau, man, and it's also up for us. And it starts with the elect, the Israel of Israel. Those are the ones that are going to cease from their sufferings. You Jakes, y'all think in your minds you've ceased from those sufferings, but really you're still suffering, man. And we're at such a low mental state in society that you in your head is going to suffer greatly. You are already. You're just living in delusion, man. That's the majority of Jake. But these other nations, they're going to get theirs too. Verse 12, it says, though a sinner do evil 100 times and his days be prolonged, yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear the Lord, which fear before him. But it shall not be well with the wicked, and Esau Edom is the chief wicked. Okay, and you have people of this earth, including Israelites, that follow after this devil and try to emulate this devil. So they've made themselves wicked because they see how being wicked prospers on the earth, but no one can ever get to Esau's level. And only a few of these nations has Esau actually let get anywhere close to how Esau lives in this earth. And I'm talking about these leaders, these people that you ain't never heard their names. People who you know nothing about. You don't know when they went and got married, the events they had, none of that shit. But you can say that about Jake. That's all these different celebrities. Oh yeah, he had a wedding, this and that, and these people came, and you don't hear that shit about these devils. Their rooms are completely different. Okay? So going back to this article here, let me skip on down. just a quick, it said, what happens if the Bank of Japan raises rates aggressively? It can create a chain reaction. The Bank of Japan raises the rates. Japanese bonds become more attractive. Remember, that's that debt. The yen strengthens. Carry trade becomes less profitable, so that conversion of yen to dollars, and then with those dollars, bonds were purchased, and that profit of whatever, it gave the example of 4 to 5%, that was gained on top of the 0.1%. Again, an example. That is that profit, that difference in interest is the profit that people were doing. And that cycle is called a carry trade. It says investors then start selling foreign assets to repay the yen loans. You see, so now these investors who are losing money because their profit margins are becoming smaller. Okay, now the yen isn't 0.1, now it's 1.1. Or now it's 1.0, as let's just use that number. So you see that jump. And that's an aggressive rate hike. Okay, obviously that's been a little bit over time, but in a hypothetical sense, in the sense of the example, if it went from 0.1 to 1, that would greatly, these investors would be like, oh, damn, hold up. I'm not going to be making as much money as this. Is this profitable still for me? All right, so what do they start to do? Like I said here, selling foreign assets to repay those yen loans, because now they owe more than they did before. Money flows back towards Japan, right? Because they're paying for the yen. They have to convert whatever currency, all right? In this example, gave the US dollars over onto yen, okay? And remember, $1 US gains you more yen. So you're getting now that money you made on profit. When you transfer it back to yen, you're actually making more money. Okay, the money, then this is where that saying, let money work, let money do its thing, or let money work for you. That's what they're talking about. All right, you do certain different investments like that where what you input, you pay less on the thing that now you're getting to where you're going to make more money. The investment that you're going to put that money towards that yields you a higher percent interest, and that difference in interest, you gain money, and from, you still paying off that other loan. You see what I'm saying? All right, so then it says the U.S., European, Asian assets prices can fall. That's why people are watching Japan so closely. So this is the part where, let me get to the part where I just told it to go ahead and give me that step by step. And I'm just going to go over the points. All right, so here's the potential domino effect. The scenario, Japan raises rates and the yen starts strengthening. Remember, or imagine the Bank of Japan raises its policy rate from 1.0 to 1.25, and markets conclude that more hikes are coming, and that's key. Remember, the markets conclude that more hikes are coming. So they're guessing, they're making a bet that, hey, they just moved it up to 1.5. We anticipate that they're going to keep rising it as the year goes on. And that's important to know when you're an investor looking to invest money, to make an investment. You have to understand the long term, not the short term. Okay, it says that doesn't sound dramatic, but here's where it gets interesting. Step 1, the yen begins rising. Suppose the US dollar to the Japanese yen goes from 159. So $1 US used to get you 159 yen. Now it goes down to $1 gets you 150 yen. So now you're getting less yen for that same dollar. It says, remember, a lower USD Japanese yen number means the yen is getting stronger. Okay, that example of 159 to 50. The reason is simple. Investors now expect Japanese assets to produce better returns. And suddenly investors who borrowed yen at low rates are sitting on a problem, right? You bought this loan at 0.1%. The interest rates have now gone up to 1.25%. So that profit that you've been making since you bought those, since you got that that return at 0.1, you've been making nothing but profit off that. So now, let's say you had that money invested into, something that's returning you 4%, right? So you were making you started off making in excess of 0.9% or 0.9 3.9% interest rates. That was your profit, or 3.9%. That's where you were profiting. Now it went up to 1.25%. So now you're making your profit margin is 2.75%. Okay. All right. That's your rate of exchange. The asset you bought at 4% interest rate or interest, that's what your return is. It's still 4.0. But now your interest that you pay on that loan you originally got, right, went up to 1.25%. So now you owe back more. Okay. So you're not making as much money. So that money that you had remainder, whatever you were doing with it, you got to do something about it before you go. All that money goes poof. Okay. So it says step 2, the yen carry trade starts getting squeezed. Consider a hypothetical hedge fund. It borrows 10 billion yen at a low Japanese interest rate. It converts that money into dollars and invests in U.S. stocks, U.S. Treasury bonds, corporate bonds, emerging market stocks, commodities, cryptocurrency, key, etc. It was essentially betting I can borrow cheap yen and earn more somewhere else, you see? So you get a loan out for yen for $10 billion, right? That's the example. And you use that 10 billion yen and you convert that to US dollars. And with that money, you purchase all these different sorts of investments that yield you more than the interest that you're borrowing that money in the first place. Okay? But then the yen appreciates. If the fund eventually has to convert its dollars back into yen, it needs more dollars to repay the same yen debt. So the fund starts selling its investments. And this is where things get dangerous. Step 3, selling starts spreading across markets. You see? So all these different investors, all right, now they start selling in to try to keep their profit margins, that balance sheet balanced. Okay, something has to be done. All right. It says, imagine thousands of funds doing the same thing. They don't necessarily sell because they think Apple, Nvidia, Bitcoin, etc. are bad investments. They sell because they need liquidity. You see, they need money. Okay, because shit ain't looking good right now, and we may have to, make some payouts. That's Esau's MO. Remember, they are, publicly traded company. So at the end of the day, they have to pay out those shareholders before they do anything else. Okay, before anything else goes, they got to pay shareholders, or at least pay some. I'll say that. I'll pay off the top, if you get what I'm saying. All right. But it says they need liquidity. That's a huge distinction. You could therefore get yen going up and carry trade profitability going down. Again, remember that was that whole system of making money in the first place. It says leveraged positions liquidated, then stocks go down, then bonds and others assets sell. Okay, more bonds and more assets are being sold. More liquidity demanded. So people are trying to get more. People are trying to rush to get, some form of cash. Okay, a form of a dollar, which is a weight of measurement. A weight of a currency. All right. It says more selling continues. All right. This is why the yen carry trade can act like a financial lever. Step 4, the Nasdaq could get hit particularly hard. The first place I'd watch would be high valuation growth stocks. Why? Because investors who are using cheap financing to take risk tend to gravitate towards assets with high expected returns, i.e., AI companies, semiconductor companies, speculative technology, high growth stocks, crypto, and emerging markets. Okay? You see, so those companies start to get hit. Okay, because they were the more riskier, because you're looking into the future with a lot of those companies right now that people invest in. They're looking more towards the future, and when the future is not looking as profitable, people tend to back out of those more questionable trades, or the trades they were more anxious about. Okay. Because remember, people are going to be panicking. You want to try to mitigate your stress, okay? Especially as someone who, you know, is in charge of a company's value, okay? It's currency, it's money, or even your own money, you know, if you're on that higher of a level. All right, but so imagine the following sequence. Nikkei goes down, the Nasdaq goes down, Bitcoin goes down, emerging market currencies goes down. At the same time, the yen goes up. The combination will tell you that the carry trade is probably being unwound. We've already seen evidence that a yen rally can cause violent global market moves. The example of the 2024 carry trade unwind is the obvious recent example. And current Japanese market commentary is specifically warning that a stronger yen could pressure treasuries, technology stocks, and other risk assets. You see, it can cause a big, especially with technology. This is what these whole data centers, so imagine, you know, a lot of these companies laying people off because they're trying to keep profits, because this is what happens, man. As investors start, you know, backing out of certain deals, companies start to scramble for how are we going to cover this money that we once had. So they start to make cuts. Okay, so step 5, Japanese investors start bringing money to Japan. And it goes in onto that. So, you know, it just basically states that investing in Japanese bonds doesn't seem as so risky because now the stakes are a little bit higher. You know, to put it in layman's terms, there's the opportunity to make more money. It may not be as high or as much as American U.S. bonds, but it's still high enough to where the risk is not as high, and because you're staying within yen, okay, it makes things a lot more easier. All right, but you're still gonna have the chance to make a good, you know, return on rate. All right. So it says step 6, the U.S. Treasury yields could rise. This is where it starts affecting ordinary Americans. Japanese investors are major participants in the U.S. Treasury market. If they reduce purchases or sell existing treasuries, treasury prices fall. And remember, bond prices going down equal bond yields going up. So you could have Japan raises the rates, causes Japan capital returns home, so people start investing more into Japanese bonds. It says U.S. Treasury then face selling pressure. Treasury yield goes up. The U.S. borrowing cost goes up, so it costs more to borrow U.S. dollars. That's particularly significant because the U.S. 10-year Treasury is already around 4%. And that's just the number they throw. It may be higher. Who knows? While the 30-year Treasury has recently traded above 5.2%. So Japan doesn't have to crash America. It could simply make an already difficult U.S. bond market situation worse, you see? So this place would essentially, what they're saying is it will still crash on its own. It wouldn't be, you couldn't really put it to a point to say, oh, well, it was Japan's fault. No, America's already weak. Again, remember, we would have healed her, but she is not healed. Okay? It says verse 7, mortgage rates could rise. So people who are already hurt making those payments, those house payments, hey, they're going to have to start paying more. And a lot of people are going to go into crisis mode, man. When you have nothing else to lose it, you lose it, man. This is the world we're entering into. Okay? It says, here's where this gets closer to your personal finances. The U.S. market rates aren't directly set by the Federal Reserve. They're highly influenced by long-term treasury yields. So if Japanese capital flows contribute to higher long-term treasury yields going up, mortgage rates go up, monthly mortgage payments goes up, housing affordability obviously goes down, and in turn that causes home prices potentially come under pressure. This is one reason the Japan situation matters to someone who doesn't own a single Japanese stock. Then it says step 8, the Federal Reserve gets trapped. This is where the situation becomes extremely interesting. Suppose the U.S. economy is slowing. Normally, the Fed might want to cut rates, but simultaneously, Japanese capital is leaving U.S. bonds treasury yields rise. So the Fed could potentially be thinking the economy needs lower rates, while the bond market is saying we're pushing long-term high rates. That's essentially a financial conditions problem. And this place will be through. The current U.S. yield curve is already showing some unusual pressure. Short-term yields have been falling on expectations around Fed policy, while long-term yields have remained elevated. All right, step 9, the U.S. government gets hit. This is an underrated part. The U.S. government has to refinance enormous amounts of debt. If treasury yields go from 4.7% to 5.2% to then 5.5%, the government's interest expense becomes increasingly expensive. And you don't even want to know how much money is on that. You can go look it up by yourself on that U.S. debt clock, but go look up the interest expense of America, and your heart may drop, or your jaw may drop, and that creates a nasty feedback loop. Higher yields, higher government interest expense, larger deficits, more treasury insurance, more bonds supplied to market, the potential of higher yields, higher interest expense for everybody, not just the government, not just for huge investors, but interest rates go up for everybody because the banks borrow from the Fed. You know, there's a chain of how the money eventually gets to you, and every step along the way is taxed, so to say. All right, say step 11. I'm just going to read these last couple steps because we're pretty much done with the lesson. It says, then you can get the wealth effect. Now imagine the Japanese happen simultaneously. The S&P 500, the NASDAQ, Bitcoin, they all go down. Treasury yields and mortgage rates go up. People suddenly feel poor. They stop buying discretionary things. Businesses see weaker demand. Companies reduce hiring. Eventually, the economic growth go down. And keep in mind, all these things have already been happening. All right? Mortgage rates have gone up. Treasury yields have gone up. Bitcoin's lost percentage of its value. NASDAQ the same. The S&P the same. All right? Companies have begun to reduce hiring. Businesses have got rid of people. Businesses, weaker demand. All that has already been happening. It says that's when a financial market event could turn into an actual economic recession. So, again, we've been in it. They ain't told you that. They've been hiding it from you and trying to distract you by other things. When in all actuality, this place is completely falling apart. Say step 11, the really bad scenario. The nightmare isn't simply Japan raises rates. It's Japan raises rates unexpectedly and the yen rapidly appreciates. Okay. Step 12, central banks could intervene. If the selling becomes disorderly, central banks don't necessarily sit there and watch. What you could potentially see the Bank of Japan, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury, other central banks coordinating to stabilize currency and financial markets. How do you think that's going to happen? A one world government, a new world order, a one world currency based off of the XRP ledger. Okay, it says, and this isn't merely theoretical. The U.S. and Japan have already intervened together, going back to that article that I read, in the yen market this year, something that is highly unusual. That's one reason it wouldn't dismiss what's happening as simply Japan's problem. So this thing could get real nasty here real soon, man. You know, we getting close to the end, man. This devil's getting ready to pull the rug, and this chip is going to become the solution to what's about to happen. All right, so hey, Lord's Withers was edifying. I want to give all the praise and all the glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachahakwadash. Double honors to the elders, apostles of Great Millstone, and much blessing and salutations to the Akim around the four corners of the earth, who are diligently pushing out this truth and its truth and sincerity. With that, I say Shalom.